While everyone else chases high margin beauty and VMS, Nate Cooper at Barrel Ventures is betting on a sector that's capital intensive, margin challenged, but also one of the only industries every human on earth interacts with 3 times a day. That paradox is exactly where Barrel finds alpha. In this conversation, Nate breaks down why food is massively underfunded, despite its trillion-dollar habitual demand, what founders get wrong when pitching CPG, especially the we're a billion-dollar brand myth, how Barrel thinks about velocity, gross margin, and true venture scale, and why GLP-1s will hit alcohol harder than food and what fills the gap, how he evaluates founders on humility, grit, coachability, and the ability to ask for help. Nate also talks about what made bets like Olipop, Nowadays, Gonanas work, and why innovation still breaks through in crowded categories when it genuinely solves a real consumer gap. Welcome to In the Money, an exploration of whether you can still make money in D2C and CPG. We talk to some of the most interesting $5 million to $50 million founders, operators, investors, and acquirers to ultimately answer the question, is D2C and CPG still a good business? Hope you'll enjoy the show. Nate, you focus on food and the food ecosystem. At least outside looking in, we don't do much there, but food is capital intensive. It's doesn't have the same 70 to 90% margin profile of beauty and VMS. How do you think about it as a venture-backable asset class? And how do you think about it kind of in capital markets 2025, 2026?
Yeah, so I think you can separate this into like a pro and con chart, right? And so the cons are everything you just mentioned. It's capital intensive. Margins are not great compared to software, VMS supplements. And I could probably go on for hours and hours and hours and longer on why you shouldn't invest in this category. On the other, it's the only industry that every single person on the planet interacts with 3 times a day, multi-trillions of dollars. It is the most habitual, probably in the same way as VMS and skincare, but like incredibly habitual. Once people who drink Starbucks every morning do that for life, right? People who eat a Chobani yogurt for every morning do that for life. People who drink an Olipop or a Coke for lunch do that for life. And so you have this innate ability to ingrain yourself in the habitual aspect of a consumer for years and years and years, which is incredibly valuable. And, the lifetime value of a customer can make up for the lower than, optimal margins. And I think it's an industry that's undergoing massive transformation, right? There's, when you look at crops and commodities, you look at what happened to the price of cocoa, you look at wheat in Europe during the war in Ukraine. There are a lot of opportunities that I think go overlooked in this industry because most people don't understand it. But there's unbelievable opportunity here. And, it's incredibly exciting for us because I think it's A, one of the biggest industries in the world, and B, the most underfunded.
Are there capital intensive components and or margin components that you're kind of looking at when you're identifying an investment, or at the early stages, hey, we're less concerned about that. It's more about whether it's velocity or something else?
Look, if something has negative gross margins from the start, I'm going to be hard pressed to invest in it unless there's a clear line of sight to like getting really, really solid margins. Velocities are much more important than door count. Door count to me is a vanity metric. In the private equity world, you look at things and say, okay, what can go wrong? Right? And you evaluate it from that. In the venture world, you have to flip it on its head and say, okay, what if everything goes right? How big can this be? And that's sort of the lens that I try to look through for some of these, at least on the CPG side, right? Because, let's call it a very small center of the aisle grocery item, right? That maybe has a $100 million, TAM. You could build a great business there, a great profitable business. Is it a venture scale business? Absolutely not. Right. And so something needs to be potentially able to reach, a few $100 million, if not $1 billion in sales for me to get really excited about it.
And what's the stage that Barrel typically enters? And what does that company kind of look like?
Yeah. So we've done everything pre-revenue to Series A, which is, we did Olipop before they did $1 in sales. We did Nowadays, I think when they were at about 10 or 15. On the software side, we've done pre-revenue. We've done, $1 million in ARR, but we look to sort of underwrite things. Does it have the potential of returning the fund, right? Or a large chunk of the fund? Can we understand it first and foremost? And can we and our network, add a disproportionate amount of value?
You mentioned a couple of brands. Yeah, are there any brands that in the Barrel portfolio that the audience might know, and specifically like attributes of their success?
Yeah. So Love Corn was one of the first brands we invested in. Olipop, obviously the most well known we invested in. Nowadays is one of the newer ones, which is super exciting. Gonanas is another one, which also happens to be my sister-in-law, and they're kicking ass. They've built a really exciting brand that has an incredible loyal returning customer following. Attributes of their success. I think when you look at it holistically on the outside, and let's look at, Olipop and Nowadays, for example, people in that category were desperate for another solution, right? So going back 8 years, which is crazy, the thesis on Olipop was, hey, you've got this category, soda, which is the largest category, in beverage in the world. And I tried my first taste of Olipop, and I closed my eyes like, I feel like I'm drinking a Diet Coke, right? And the way I looked at it was, you've got kombucha, and this was 2018, which, overnight had become $1 billion category, and millions of people would love to drink it for its functional benefits, but don't because it tastes like shit. Sorry. Me will include it. And on the other, you've got, tens, if not hundreds of millions of people who would love to stop drinking soda and drink something different, or pop. Being from the Midwest, I should call it pop. But don't and can't because nothing's filled that gap and it's addictive. And like this to me was like, this is the answer. And a light bulb went off. Never in a million years did I think they'd achieve the success that they have. But, that goes to the team and company that Ben and David built, and the success they've had. And then nowadays, on the other hand, you look at the macro trends of alcohol, right? Alcohol is at its lowest recorded point ever. I think we're of a similar age. I have a drink now and I feel horrible after one drink, right? I wake up hungover. My kids wake me up. I don't sleep. The holy grail would be something that gives you a buzz, the social lubrication without any of the downside. And I'm someone, I've never been into a dispensary. I've never smoked a joint, never eaten an edible. And, this sort of checks all those boxes. Obviously there's the ban, the looming ban that came in the government opening bill. We're hopeful and optimistic that a beverage carve out gets done. And I really think that's highly possible. But the likelihood, I think that if it doesn't, this will be a massive home run because it is, the numbers are insane. I've never seen a category take up this much shelf space in liquor stores so quickly. And that's kind of what we're seeing there.
Yeah, amazing. AI. Everyone's talking about it, and you're worried you're getting left behind. Meet RichPanel, an AI-first customer support platform that's built for one thing: making support faster, smarter, and cheaper for e-commerce brands. Something you can actually feel smarter about using. RichPanel combines a unified inbox across email, chat, and socials, a customizable self-service portal that customers actually use, and Sidekick AI, powered by GPT-4, which learns from your past tickets to suggest on-brand replies. Does it actually work? Well, with RichPanel's guarantee, you get guaranteed 30% cost savings when you switch from Zendesk or Gorgeous, 30% automation to reduce your ticket volume, and a no-risk guarantee that if RichPanel doesn't deliver those results in 60 days, you get a full refund. That's why top brands like Ridge Wallet, Jones Road Beauty, and Pella Cases are already using RichPanel to save hundreds of thousands in support costs. Time to start letting AI work for you. Head to richpanel.com and start your free trial today. Real savings, real automation, real AI that actually works. Is there anything that's changed in the last couple of years on how early stage investors are thinking about CPGs, maybe specifically food companies?
I think there's a lot of, with the stuff that's happening beyond meat and the cultivated meat and that space, there's been a lot of tourist investors, right? The traditional VCs that threw fistfuls of money into this stuff and now are staying away, and it's created headwinds for everyone else who's doing quote unquote real stuff in the industry. My take on it is a lot of these things that were food tech, at the end of the day, what they're selling is a CPG product. And so they were being valued as this crazy frontier technology, but they're selling a product to consumers. And so
Yeah.
A, they should be valued as a company that's selling a product to consumers. And B, if consumers don't actually want that product at the levels they do, the company is not worth, a fraction of what the valuations that they're getting.
Yeah. Staying on trends, are there kind of any particular trends that you're excited about, or that, like food tech, is maybe a little bit overhyped, whether that's functional, clean label, GLP-1 driven consumption?
Yeah. So I think there's a lot of really interesting, exciting things happening in the broader world of food. I think future-proofing ingredients is super exciting. So we've got a company that's using cell cultures to make cocoa derivatives out of Israel called Celeste Bio, which is amazing. I'm sure people have been paying attention to the price of cocoa over the last few years, which has spiked and then came down a little bit, but spiked again. If you talk to, people on the outside, they say, oh, it's, a moment in time. But if you talk to people at these massive chocolate companies, they say, like, this is what the future looks like. And we need to figure out, you don't want to be paying $8 for a Snickers bar, right? High value ingredients. So, we have a company called Helena in New York, which is using precision fermentation to create lactoferrin, which is the protein found in breast milk, for infant nutrition, but also adult nutrition. And so the analogy I like to make is, imagine 20, 25 years ago, nobody knew what pre and probiotics were, right? Nobody knew what collagen was. Imagine if one company owned the IP to that, how big, either of those would be. That's sort of what we're hopeful Helena can be. And then I think, with the advent of GLP-1s, everyone, when they first came on, was panicked at what this would do to grocery and food. I do think it's going to have an impact. I think it's going to be slow and gradual on food. I think protein is super interesting. What I do think it's going to have an even more significant impact on, so if you take a step back, what GLP-1s are doing are decreasing addictive behaviors, right? I think it's going to have a much more significant impact on alcohol than it does on food and alcohol consumption.
Yeah, interesting.
And so that's, affecting trends in drinking beer, wine, spirits, RTDs. And that's why, our bet on nowadays, I think, is really interesting in that category.
You've talked about the network. How do you and the network like to help portfolio companies?
I think I, grew up in a world where I was taught there's givers and takers. And I believe in karma. And right. So I think I'm of myself as a giver. And so I like to make connections between people. It's something that just kind of comes naturally to me and I don't even think about. And granted, not everyone thinks that way. And I believe that it's going to come back full circle. And I think that's sort of my superpower, right? Is connecting people, connecting companies to people who are solving problems, who need problems solved. And so whether it's fundraising, business development, like we try to add value wherever we can to our portfolio. And it's, knock on wood, paid off so far.
We opened with kind of talking about retail velocity being a true north. Is retail strategy, buyer relationship something that you get involved with, or that's largely left at the brand level?
We can certainly help. We've got relationships to brokers, to retailers, things like that. And again, like there's no set formula for my network, right? It is this like thing in the back of my head and LinkedIn that I've cultivated throughout the years and is like second nature to me. And it's something we certainly help, but there's no like, hey, if we invest in you, we're going to introduce you to XYZ. It's kind of just like, who do you need to know? There's a likelihood, we're 1 degree of separation from them, or someone in our network is, 1 degree of separation from them.
If you think selling to your domestic market is good, wait till you see what happens when you truly go global. That's where Passport comes in. Passport is a full-stack global commerce partner built for ambitious brands that want real international scale without the headaches. They can help you launch and ship in-country in key markets such as Canada, UK, EU, and Australia. Or they can help you ship cross-border. With Passport, you get smooth international shipping to over 180 markets, fast, DDP ready, with branded tracking, high-touch customer support, and top-tier delivery success. Your compliance, taxes, duties, and customs handled end-to-end. No surprises at checkout or customs. just clean cross-border expansion. They'll even handle your duty drawback claims. And you get localization and storefront adaptation, local currencies, shipping rates, payment methods, and tailored checkout experiences so your brand feels local no matter where you ship. Passport works with most US and UK based 3PLs and with top brands like Ridge, Hexclad, OneSkin, Dole's Kill, and many more that have already turned Passport into their growth engine for global sales. So if you're thinking global, if you want to scale into new markets, unlock demand outside your home country, and do it the right way, go check out passportglobal.com. How do you coach founders on capital efficiency? Brands take a long time to build. In food, there can be long production cycles. How do you think about capital efficiency for brands?
As someone whose business failed because we ran out of money, right? Businesses don't fail because they're horrible. Some do, but the vast majority of businesses fail because they run out of money. I always advise people to take more money than you need, but not a stupid amount. And even when you get the money, spend like you don't have it, right? And so, when you are running on fumes, and then all of a sudden you get a big capital injection, it's like this relief. I think founders who sort of always live in the mindset of this could be our last dollar, and spend diligently, you make much better decisions. What's happened over the past decade or so is that these brands can be built so quickly, right? And, companies can go from $0 to $50 million in sales overnight because of online and DTC. At the end of the day, something that I don't know if I said it or someone else said it, but I think brands can be built online. Companies need to be built in the store, right? And so you can build a great number of sales online, but at the end of the day, if you have no retail presence, it's not worthless, but it's not the same, right? I'd take $50 million in, in-person sales and I would online sales for a consumer product, the vast majority of consumer products, any day of the week. Right? Beverages are super heavy, and the margins of DTC beverages of a soda company or a pop company aren't great, right? Because it's not a super high price point and shipping's expensive because beverages are heavy. I don't think Olipop launched online sales until the middle of 2020 during COVID when they had to because people weren't leaving their houses. And then you've got brands that are growing. Look at David Bar. I think they did some crazy amount of sales online, right? Because it's a light product. It's a decent sized price point. The margins are good and they can build online sales before they go to retail.
What would be still common misconceptions that founders have when pitching a food or beverage brand to an institutional investor?
Selling yourself as a $1 billion brand. I can count probably on one or two hands the number of $1 billion brands in broader food CPG that have been built in the past decade. The biggest winners, the RX bars, Simple Mills, Siete, only one of those three was a $1 billion brand when they sold, right? And so the likelihood of you building a $1 billion brand in this category are like one out of thousands upon thousands, one out of a million, right? It's more common in beverage, right, than it is in food CPG, but it's still, one out of millions. I've seen probably multiple thousands of beverage brands pitched to me over the past 5 years. And I think two maybe had the chance of getting to $1 billion in sales.
And so how should a founder wants to come across as ambitious? Like, how do you balance that level of ambition versus realism?
Look, I love to see ambition, right? As a venture capitalist, I want to look at people who think big, right? But don't pitch me something saying we're going to be the biggest company in this category that's ever lived, right? Because the odds of that happening are, say, hey, we can own a majority of this category, that's fine, right? But, saying we're going to we're starting a new soda company, we're going to be bigger than Coca-Cola, like, that's impossible.
Yeah.
Like, that literally will not happen. They've got 100 years of distribution advantages before you.
Let's talk about credit. How do you view credit and debt as a part of the capital stack? Are you in favor of it because, hey, it extends runway and you don't want to be using equity dollars to be funding inventory? Or are you saying like, hey, we don't like credit has a payback period and we want to be careful about that?
I support it. If you're running a reasonable business, right? Like if you're running a business with good margins, and, a decent customer acquisition cost and a good CAC to LTV, by all means, credit should be a portion of your capital stack. If you're running a business that has negative gross margins and is an unsustainable business, then adding debt on top of all that is just going to make your business more unsustainable.
Are there attributes of founders who can build something enduring? We've talked about that, brands take a long time to build. What are signals from founders that you're looking for?
I think those are the most important things. We invest in people at this stage, right? At the earliest stage, it's people more than product over anything else. So it's humility. Would I go and work with and for these people? Grit. Shit's going to hit this fan at early stage startups, and you need to be able to handle that and how you're going to do it. Not being afraid to ask for help, right? Like people who think they know it all and can do it all and know better than anyone else, often they don't. And, I always say if I'm the smartest person in the room, I'm in the wrong room. And so, I want founders who sort of think that way too, who want smarter people around them, who want, to be coached and ask for advice. Look, I don't know everything. Far from it. A lot of the success I've had is luck by all means, but, I try to surround myself with really smart people and a really good network. And that's kind of what we echo into our founders too, is that we can be helpful, right? I'm not going to tell you how to run your business, but ask for help when you need it because there are a lot of people who can help.
Why do we love Numeral? Well, here's the good, the bad, the ugly. The good is that over 2,000 e-commerce store owners just like you use them for sales tax compliance, including brands like Graza, Ridge, Gruns, and 8 Sleep. The bad is that none of us got into this to spend a ton of time on sales tax and admin, which is why Numeral is able to help you in 5 minutes or less get full coverage, deal with registrations, ongoing filings, and compliance. It just all happens in the background. And the ugly is that not a lot of store owners know that sales tax is actually personally guaranteed. Said another way, that the states could end up coming after you personally if you're not on top of it. Even being a modest $5 million store owner, you could have nexus in 20 to 30 states. Again, Numeral helps you stay compliant, and they even guarantee their work. That's why we love them. Go and check them out at numeralhq.com. As we're heading into 2026, are there any particular themes that you're looking to get behind, categories you're looking to invest in?
Protein obviously is a super interesting thing. What the vessel for that will be is interesting. I don't know if it's VMS. I don't know if it's beverage. I don't know if it's powders. It's front and center of everything everyone reads these days, given GLP-1 and that sort of stuff. I think that, as I mentioned, the decline in alcohol is super interesting. And what sort of fills that gap will be fascinating to see, and how alcohol companies respond to that. My take is that alcohol companies want the hemp THC beverages to exist. They just want to be able to benefit from it. Because if I'm them, I see this category that, now has an entire aisle at liquor stores. In some states, it's making up 10 to 20% of the liquor store sales, which is mind blowing.
That's crazy.
You've got a $500 million industry, but they can't benefit from it now because there's no federal regulations, right? If they could, they'd be snapping these things up left and right because it's going to plug the gap and return them to growth instead of shrinking. Those are some that are sort of first top of mind.
Well, let's talk about protein for a second, just because, if I go to the grocery RTD section, there are now so many options. Like, as an investor, can you still get excited about bars or beverages when there just are so many protein options already?
It's hard. I have a friend that just sent me a bar company today. And, my line on bar companies recently has been like, I hate the category. I'll take a look, but I love the company, but hate the category. That being said, I said the same thing about David Bar, right? Look at it now. I think there's always room for innovation and something that's sort of doing something new and reinventing the game. No matter how big the category, no matter how crowded the category. Do I think another prebiotic soda launched today is going to be successful? Probably not, right? But I think something innovative in beverage, is going to come out in the next 3 to 5 years. It'll probably build $1 billion business, hands down. Yeah, I think there are innovations that happen, every couple of years in every major category that you think is picked through and, proven out, and then something new comes up.
Given that you are investing in the ecosystem beyond the brands as well, is there a tactic, marketing channel, piece of technology that's working especially well for the portfolio right now?
I think LTOs are working really well for brands. Um, one of our brands, Gonanas, they have done an incredible job of doing LTOs with influencers online, on Instagram and TikTok. And I think they've done, 70 different flavors in the past few years. And they sell out pretty much every single one of them. And interesting technologies that are working. I think anything that sort of helps you do more with less. How do you turn a 4-hour task into a 4-minute task, or how do you get your numbers quicker? And so we have 2 companies in our portfolio. One Iris, which is in Chicago, and another called Confido, which are both using AI to sort of help the back end of these businesses. And the feedback on both of them has been mind blowing.
On kind of product collabs, influencer driven or otherwise, like we've also seen the opposite where they take so much time to activate and they don't always hit. So yeah, how they've gotten to get it to work so well.
I think they have this really unique recipe where, they're not working with the biggest, 50 million follower people, right? They're working with people who've got a few 100,000 followers, and they've got these super loyal fans, both the brand and the affiliates, where it's exciting for the affiliate to have something with their name on it. And so they're sharing it and promoting it with all their effort and all their excitement. Whereas like if you go and partner with, a massive name celebrity, it's just another few $100,000 they're getting, as a fee sponsorship that they sort of do and check the box and, what's next. But
Yeah.
these affiliates, like they really care about it because it's super exciting to them.
Nate, what's your biggest piece of advice for founders heading into 2026 in terms of capital planning?
Prepare for the worst and hope for the best. And that's sort of advice I would give no matter what the macroeconomic situation was. I'm an optimist at heart. And so, there's a line, pessimists are more often right, optimists get rich. But I think you also have to be a realist, right? If you hope for the best, but prepare for the worst, like you're sort of prepared for every scenario, right?
Yeah. As we head towards a wrap, is there anything you're seeking from listeners, brands, operators, collaborators?
I want to talk to anyone and everything. If you're doing something interesting in this industry, like reach out to me. I'm happy to chat, advice, introductions, however I can help in any way. I love meeting new people and new ideas.
Nate, thanks so much for coming on and look forward to next time.
Thank you. Cheers, man.